The other day, I was at a ladies' event, and the lady who was sharing was kind of sharing part of her testimony. And she said that when she was about 6 years old, she was in a pastor's home. She was at a church, and they always had missionaries come through and share their incredible stories and testimonies of things that have been happening in various places. And she said that from the age of 6, she really felt like she wanted to be a missionary to Africa. And she said she grew up and she ended up going to Bible school, even kind of studying some about missions. And she ended up marrying a man who was called to be a pastor. And so he became a pastor, and she was now a pastor's wife. And still, actually, to this day, they are pastoring, and she's a pastor's wife. Well, through a series of events at the age of around, I think she said it was about 66 years old, she ended up going to Africa for the first time on a missions trip out of their church. And thinking about this concept, I'm thinking, well, it took 60 years for her dream to be fulfilled. How did she wait in the process? We talked about that last week, about how you wait is so important. And she got involved in missions there locally in her community. You know, she's sitting there, and I'm not in Africa, I'm not a missionary to Africa, but she got involved on a local level in her community with various outreaches and various things going on. And basically, the thing that jumped out at me is what she didn't do was say, well, if I can't go to Africa, then I'm just not going to do anything for God. And you know, a lot of us would say, oh, I would never say that to the Lord. But you know, we kind of do in our actions. You know, well, if God doesn't fulfill that dream, the dream I have, the one thing, I have this picture of what it looks like. And if He doesn't do it the way I think it should be done, then I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just going to sit down until He does that thing in the way that I think it should be done. Well, while in her particular case, it took 60 years for her to see the fulfillment of a dream, not to be a full-time missionary, but to do missions work in Africa. It took 60 years in her case. God used her in the meantime to reach her community with tons of people who otherwise may not have heard the gospel or wouldn't have heard it as quickly as they could have because of her obedience. But really what I want to shift and talk to you today, less than about last week we talked about waiting and how we wait, but I want you to realize how quickly God can change things in your dreams. And next thing you know, you're standing in your dream, standing in your goal, living out the dream and the goal that God has given you. I'm reminded of the story in John chapter 11, the story of Lazarus. And most of us know that story, that Jesus heard about him being sick. He didn't get there immediately. And when he shows up in that town, Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. He's been buried and dead for 4 days. And Jesus steps into this situation, and in an instant, in a matter of 3 words, everything for Lazarus changed. Everything for his sisters changed. When Jesus stepped up with 3 words, Lazarus, come forth, everything changed. It was one way in this moment, and in an instant, everything changed. Tears were exchanged for laughter. Depression was changed for gladness. Mourning was changed for everyone hugging each other, so glad that Lazarus was alive and that Jesus had come on to the scene. That's how quickly everything in our life can change when Jesus steps in. I'm also reminded of the story in Genesis 41, though the other chapters than just 41, but about the story and the life of Joseph. Joseph, at a young age, by his brothers, was sold into slavery. He becomes a slave in Egypt. He's thrown into prison and actually thrown in there on falsely accused, charges that weren't true. At 30 years old, this was Joseph's testimony. He had been a slave. He had been a prisoner. This was his testimony at 30 years old. But on his 31st birthday, he was the second in command in Egypt. How quickly things can change. In fact, it says in Genesis 41, chapter 39 through 41, it tells us this. Let's read these verses about Joseph. It says, "Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, 'Inasmuch as God has shown you all this, there is no one as discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall be ruled according to your word. only in regard to the throne will I be greater than you. That's amazing. This is amazing. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Everything changed in an instant. That's what God can do when we are faithful as we wait, when we obey as we wait, and when we wait properly and trust Him in the process. Trust Him in the process, and then understand that in an instant, things in our life can change. I know some things take longer. I know some things have a longer span of time before we feel like we're seeing movement. But I know that God is working and moving and putting things in order and putting things in place that would have never happened had our dream happened in the timing that we wanted. But in God's sovereignty, in God's knowledge of all things, so much greater and better than ours, God's timing is perfect, but in an instant, things can change. Now, let me tell you about one other person. We talked about Lazarus and how quickly it changed. We talked about Joseph and how quickly it changed. Well, let me tell you about somebody else, and her name is Kathy. Oh, that's me, by the way. I don't have a book in the Bible, but anyway, it's me. It's my story. It's my testimony. Last week in the study that we did, I told you about being in college and how that with one phone call, the plan, the trajectory of my life would change, and it would be the answer to a dream to step into that full-time ministry role, which now, 34 years later, I am still in full-time ministry, and that role has shifted and changed, but it's still fulfilling that dream that God gave me. But move forward from what I shared about being a college student and God supplying that dream and that fulfillment of that to several years back from today. If I can look back 7-8 years ago, God began to birth in my heart and in the need of the ministry that I was involved in, that a retreat that could be done for military wives, first responder wives, and women who've served in these capacities. And so we began to do abide retreats, and many of you have heard me talk about those, and you know about those. As I began to do those for years and years, I wanted to do them across the country, across the United States, not just do them in one location, but to be able to branch out and do them in other places. And I've just prayed that prayer to the Lord. I've put that out there. I feel like the Lord's given me that as a dream, but I look at that dream and just go, okay, I don't have a clue how to do that. I don't know how to make that happen. And so I have prayed about this over and over. And in 2018, we had a beautiful lady come to one of our retreats. And when she was there, she was getting ready, finishing up some itineration, and she was headed to Japan to be a missionary pastor / both, a missionary going to Japan to pastor a local church there in the community of Misawa. And when she was at the retreat, and she said to me, Kathy, when I get to Japan, she said, I will get settled and get some things in order, and then I'm going to call you and we'll set up for you to come do an abide retreat in Japan. Well, I was like, thank you. That'll be great. And I remember when she left, I thought, that'll never happen. This wasn't a lack of faith. Technically, I guess it was, but I didn't feel that it was that way. It was really just the reality of, okay, what's the reality of her going and getting settled and then calling me to come do a retreat? I'm like, oh, well, thank you. Okay, well, yeah, you just give me a call. Sure enough, about a year after she had been there, I got a message from her, and she said, hey, I'm ready to talk about the details. How do we do it? And we did. We set it up, and in 2020, right before everything shut down in this amazing, crazy world we live in, she invited me over, and we did this retreat. It was wonderful. God blessed. God moved. 4 years later, I went back. In 2023, I went back and did this again. 2024. Went back and did this again. And so we've done this twice, and we're even talking about doing it again in the future. And what an amazing opportunity. And I'm so excited to partner with her and to work with her in that way. But I even still had this dream of doing them across the United States, to right here in America, to be able to do these retreats in other places. And I had told the Lord on occasion, Lord, I would really like to do that. And I've always said this to the Lord, Lord, my answer to you is yes. Now, what was the question? That's been my heart posture to the Lord. Lord, whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. Wherever you want to take me, I will do it. whatever you're asking me to do and to step out and do, Lord, the answer is yes. Now what's the question? What is that you wanted me to do? That's always been my heart posture to the Lord. But I also, on multiple occasions, have gone before the Lord, and I actually just did this fairly recently. I will go before the Lord and symbolically, as though there's a table in front of me with all of my dreams and my goals and my plans, I will go before the Lord and just kind of wipe that table off. And I will stand in His presence and I just say, okay, Lord, everything that I wanted to do, everything that I felt like was my dream or my calling, Lord, if it's not from you, I don't want it. I push it off and I say, Lord, whatever you want me to do, you put back on this table. Whatever you direct me to do and guide me to do, whatever thing you want me to take a step forward in, Lord, if you put it back on the table, then I will know it's from you. And this is just kind of the way I visually see things, and it's how I communicate to the Lord. Many of you have other ways that you will do this, but it's really my way of just saying, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. And can I pause right there and remind you that all of our dreams and goals need to be put in that filter? Is it His dream that He's giving you to do and to fulfill? His calling, He's asking you to do something? Or is it your desire that you just want to do something so badly? Sometimes those line up and come together, and I love it when they do. But sometimes God has something else He's asking us to do, and we've pushed His thing off the table, and we've set ours on the table, and we are determined to do that thing. I remind you today to bring that before the Lord and let Him change you and do a work in you. Well, let me move forward in this story, because I still had this dream before the Lord, what I really felt like was Him giving me the desire to do Abide retreats across the country. Well, in July, just right behind us, right? I'm recording this at least in August. I think it'll probably hit in September. But in July, I had a retreat, an Abide retreat, and a beautiful lady came to that retreat. And when she was there, she brought up the idea of, man, I would love to go back. And my mom lives in a town near some military installations. We'd love to maybe work together and do an Abide retreat over there. And again, I was like, oh, that'd be great. And I meant it. That would be great. Wow, that'd be wonderful. But again, when she left, there was that little bit of, well, we'll see. God does it. We'll see. Now, this is the same thing I've been praying for, right? I should be the one who's like, yes, God is answering my prayer. But in that moment, I was just kind of like, well, we'll see what happens. Well, I just had a meeting with her and her mom. And can I just say to you, they have already found a location. They've already dreamt up ways they can cover all the details, make all of the plans come together. They basically have a retreat ready to go. All I've got to do is pick the date and put the people in place to attend. That is how quickly things can change when God says now. When God puts the right people in place, when God places people in your life and in your circumstances and in your job and in whatever connects to that dream and goal that He's given you, things can change in an instant. A few months ago, I was just still praying, God, help me do these. How can we do these across the country? I don't know how. I don't have people. I don't have staff. I don't even know how to begin this conversation. Fast forward to just a few months later, and God is already working and moving, and we're literally down to picking the dates and getting it going. I'm so excited. First of all, I'm excited because I want to reach people with the gospel of Christ. I want to encourage people with that. But I'm so excited because it's a dream that has been in my heart that God is beginning to let me see it and experience it, and I cannot wait. Can I encourage you today? Don't give up on your dream. Wait properly, like we talked about last week. Wait by binding yourself together with Christ. But then don't give up. Don't get discouraged, and understand that in an instant, Jesus Christ can step into your dream and your goals and your situation, and everything that looked hopeless, that looked like you didn't know how to do it, everything can change. So keep waiting and keep trusting, but keep your eyes open and look for those things that God is doing, and He is working and moving. Believe and keep faith in the fact that He is working and moving in the things that He has called you to do for the kingdom.